Hey everyone. People are already filing in here. Great to see you all. Few changes of plans this evening. Um, First of all, the sun is just getting ready to set behind the trees here outside my window of my man cave. So you'll have far less glare from the top of my bald head into your eyeballs. So we'll be able to wait for that to happen, and as more people kind of start filing in. And hey, everyone, good to see you. Um, and yes, I agree. This should be interesting. What we have tonight is a couple of the findings that I found about Sir Francis Drake in my cipher work with the plaque on Shakespeare's Funerary monument in Stratford-upon-Avon. Hey, Jenny, good to see you back. Daniel, I'm glad you could make it, my friend. Good to see you. Um, so before we get things rolling here, like I said, right now we have a handful of people who are already watching live. So like I said, I'm going to let kind of people pile in here. Michael, glad you could make it. Um, and so all of you people are so punctual. 7 o'clock on the spot. Thanks so much for that. And like I said, a part of what we're going to be looking at this evening is controversial, and it which in my mind it means fun. Okay, I'm one of those annoying people. I just love awkward. Okay, when in one of those moments where you have a couple of relatives who have been having a little tiff or whatever, and all of a sudden they're both in the same room at the same time, and that's sort of like you know yucky feeling. I enjoy that. I'm weird that way. I really love when people have differing opinions. I think that this is one of the best things that could possibly happen when it comes to the idea of science, when it comes to historical research, the open sharing of ideas, and in that spirit, that's what I really want to get into tonight. Now, some of what I have to offer you, um, again, comes from my work with the plaque of Shakespeare's Funerary monument and the ciphers I found in it. Now, that being said, um, from there, good friend of mine, and many of you, a good friend of many of you as well, as I'm looking at the names popping up here, um, is Chris Donah, and he made a recent discovery on a brass plate that up to this point has always been labeled a hoax. Well, not always. It actually worked as a hoax. For about, I think, 40 years, something like that. And we're going to get into that and what that really means. But Chris actually found this really kind of cool alignment on it that no one has ever noticed. It coincides with some of my work, and yet it also conflicts with some of it. So I find this to be really interesting. Especially when we're just openly sharing good ideas. Now, originally Chris was going to be here with us this evening. Unfortunately, he has a family emergency and won't be able to make it. So basically, Chris, you're in our thoughts and prayers, and I'm thinking of you, buddy. I wish I could have you on here so you can explain your own ideas far better than I can. That's for sure. Yeah, Daniel basically just said, let's see, since I'm just learning how to do this. So, yeah, since 2002, they've said that it was a hoax. And once I kind of get into and introduce this idea to you all, you'll have a better understanding of what it is we're really talking about. Judy, I'm glad you could make it. Good to see you, my friend. So how do I best? I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly. Originally, I was going to banter around with Chris, and we're going to talk about how did you end up even looking at this thing in the first place when it's been labeled as hoax since, as Daniel pointed out, 2002, and how does that come about? And what I really want to know is, I mean, he's so good at finding patterns, particularly on Shakespeare's plaque and on this brass plate as well. So, um, and once again, Daniel, you're my right hand man here tonight. Thank you so much. Yeah, this brass plate was originally found in the 1930s, and it was in an area of California where people had always said that Sir Francis Drake had landed and claimed that land for Queen Elizabeth and named it New Albion. And so, um, and he chronicled in his journal, as I'm going to talk about here in this little presentation here quickly. It's going to be a real short one tonight, gang. Um, that he left a brass plaque there, and Jenny says, "Hope it's nothing too serious." Yeah, I hope so too. But like I said, it's one of those things that I wish he could be here with us for sure. Yeah, Michael, Nova Albion is absolutely right. Um, so um, I this led me to look at a map once again, and on that map, I found multiple Bacon signatures, and this is definitely the work of Francis Bacon. Now, the this brass plate, however, Chris found indications that he believes that it's entirely possible maybe it wasn't a hoax after all. Now, we have a situation here where we have a group of people claiming responsibility for creating it in the first place. We have uh, a group of people who originally validated it scientifically. And then we have another group of scientists who basically determined that the brass was made, very, very recently. And so, probably within the 1930s. And so when we have a situation like this, I like to ask questions. And so that's what we're going to be doing this evening, everyone. And what I really hope to do is just kind of open it up to a discussion with all of you, what you think. What are your thoughts on the possibility of this plaque? What was it, a hoax, or could it have been authentic? I've always been on the side that of Orthodox history. Unless I have compelling evidence to show me, whether or not it goes one way or the other scientifically, then I tend to follow the evidence, and that's just kind of how I roll on things. But what I'm going to do is quickly, let's see, Facebook user, did the claimers sign affidavits? I have no idea. That's an interesting question. So what I'm going to do, let me just share a tab with you here, and we'll take a look at some of this info and see what we come up with here, gang. So one of the things I discovered on Shakespeare's plaque was this idea that Sir Francis Bacon sailed with Sir Francis Drake at an early age. And so, this is not something that, as far as I know, is common knowledge. And so tonight, what I'm going to be going over, you see up above here is those of you familiar with my work are very familiar with this image of what is commonly called Shakespeare's plaque. And down below that is Drake's brass plate of brass, as it's usually called. So I discovered a message about Sir Francis Drake in Shakespeare's Funerary monument in the cipher text. And it's really a pretty interesting story. And then, like I said, I'm going to go over the information here about how controversial the Drake plate is. And we'll talk about that hoax story a little bit. But basically, the Reader's Digest condensed version is that it was the work of a group who called themselves Eclamps Vitus. And this was a group of people who were treasure hunters and miners, and really wanted to preserve the history of California. And one of their friends was a Drake scholar. And so they decided that they were going to create this brass plate and leave it in an area where they knew he would find it on one of their, little ventures out. And lo and behold, someone else found it before they could, you know, basically hoax him. They were going to string him along for a while, play it out as a joke, and then all of a sudden reveal the truth. That's the story. And someone else found it. It was lost to history for a while. Then all of a sudden it surfaces, and the same professor ends up buying it. And it says, "Here we have proof that Drake was here." And so the hoax kind of got out of control. And now I'm going to be sharing with you. Originally, Chris wanted to share this with you because this is his discovery, and it's really kind of cool. Um, and again, we're not saying that it's definitive of anything whatsoever, but it's kind of neat, and it's indicative of the kind of work that Chris does. And I really, uh, because I'm very familiar with all of his work and his research, um, this guy is solid. Okay, he is knowledgeable, and he doesn't necessarily just go off on wild goose chases here. And so, if he feels that there's something here worth looking at, it's worth a look, in my opinion. So, one of the things that he found was a feature that appears in the funerary monument also appears on this brass plate. And it's really pretty interesting that this correlation would happen. And if this plate is a hoax, as everyone seems to think, as I've always thought, well, then this is one of the most extraordinary coincidences I've ever seen. So I wanted to share it with you tonight. And so the other thing too is Chris immediately noticed how similar these objects are in their construction, and I think that any of you who have read my book, The Holy Trinity Decryption, know I think that I have pretty much shown quite clearly that the plaque of the funerary monument was created by Shakespeare, or excuse me, was created by Sir Francis Bacon. And so this had Chris wondering, well, could Bacon have had a hand in the creation of this plate as well? So if we start looking at Drake's plate of brass here, um, what other features are very similar between the two, and could there be a correlation here? So that's really what we're getting into. Here's a close up of it, as you can see here. Let's see, just looking at a couple of the comments that you have here. Um, I believe, let's see, could it be a reproduction? What is known of the people who claim to make it? They were all friends. They claimed that this was supposed to be a hoax. And could it be a reproduction? Perhaps. In fact, I find it interesting that some of the features actually do kind of point to Sir Francis Bacon. Um, and so, that it's a pretty interesting question there, Jenny. And and Michael, I don't know if Drake was searching for El Dorado on that specific trip. I know that on uh, other trips that um, Sir Walter Raleigh definitely searched for El Dorado multiple times. And so, and Facebook user, in Bacon's life, the date 1579 is said to be when he came back from France. Yes. In fact, I'm going to get into that timeline in some detail, because in my mind, I think that's one of the most important facets of this for me personally, and why I tend to be a little bit skeptical about this. But like I said, I want to give it its due diligence. So we'll get into that as well. Um, so a couple of the cipher texts from the funerary monument, when I deciphered it, the messages were explicit when it comes to Sir Francis Drake. He's named point blank, and the message from the plaque states, "F. Drake chose me as wisest astronomer. I time meridians." This told me that at some point after Francis Bacon returned from France, I mean, basically, he returned because his father, what I believe was his stepfather, foster father, uh, Sir Nicholas Bacon, died, and so he came back from France, and he had left him nothing in the will, really. He didn't. The story goes that he had set aside, some properties and money for him, but he didn't actually put it in his will in time. And I think those of you who have followed my work know my thoughts on that. It's more indication that Sir Francis Bacon was not Sir Nicholas's true son. So what this told me was that here he comes back, and now you have this guy, one of the greatest sailors and navigators, uh, Sir Francis Drake, and returning from circumnavigating the globe. And what better opportunity for a young man with no prospects, who is, nobly born and, an excellent mathematician and astronomer in his own right. So it seemed like it made perfect sense to me. So this indicates that he sailed with Drake. Another part of the ciphertext also claims that Frank, Francis Bacon used the alias of Baptista Boazio, who actually documented the capture of Cartagena of 1586. So, in my mind, I think that Bacon was with Drake on that campaign. I think that when he returned, he created the picture that is now so famous, that everyone is familiar with, and so that is one of the things that I think is really pretty significant. Now, this is the central question, Daniel, that I and you and I have kind of chatted about this before. I don't think he could have been on Drake's circumnavigation. I really don't. Drake left, I believe, in 1577. Bacon wasn't going to return to England until 79. The plague, this plight is dated as June of 1579. Bacon would have returned to England in February of 1579. So obviously, at that point, Sir Francis Drake was already at sea, on his campaigns, and I don't see how he could have done it. I don't see how he could have been there. But again, anything's possible. I like I said, I'm not going to say anything definitive one way or the other here this evening. But my personal opinion is no. I don't think he could have been on that voyage. The Cartagena campaign, absolutely, he definitely could have been on that. And here's that famous image, the map by Boazio. And what's really kind of cool is, and this is kind of some of the work that I go into here in my that I've been working on for my next book. Here's a close up of the ship that's down here, as you can see, and here you have a little ship boat with one lone sailor in it wearing a red coat and a very characteristic hat that looks a lot like the famous portrait of Francis Bacon later in life. But then again, that's probably just fanciful thinking on my part. Um, and here you have the coat of arms of Mary Queen of Scots as consort of France. And here we have a flag that has the same elements of the uh, British and Scottish lion with the fleur de lis. And so I find it interesting that Baptista Boazio included this style of a standard uh, flag on this image of Drake's ship. So, at any rate, here's an image that Chris sent me of some work that he had done with the Funerary Monument plaque. A lot of people are familiar with Peter Amundsen's work, and he found what he calls the Bacon pentagon. And then Chris also found a form of a Bacon pentagon using a different method here. This is Chris's image. And there's also an interlocking baron. So it says Baron Bacon around the word monument. So, that's interesting as a find. But the other thing that Chris did was he noted that the similarities in the counting system. Here we have, as he counted each of the characters in each line, there are 8 lines in this particular brass plate. There are 8 lines on Shakespeare's plaque, and they all kind of fall within this number range of the mid 30s. And so he found that to be kind of compelling. And So, these are a couple of similarities that go. So, oh, here's a really good point. Yes. Um, in 1579, when Bacon comes back, he is seated at Gray's Inn, seated in Parliament by 1584. Yes. Now, here's the thing. Um, when he was at Gray's Inn, later on, his what I believe is his stepbrother, Anthony, returns from France as well, and they kind of set up shop as a scrivener's operation. What they were really doing was intelligence work. Okay, they were writing ciphers, sending messages. They were doing a lot of intelligence work for the second Earl of Essex, Robert Devereux, uh, who was funneling that information to his mom, Queen Elizabeth. And so, when we look at those kinds of dates and that timeline, that is something that I think is really important for us to look at. But also the fact that he's seated in Parliament at a given time. Um, what we would need to do is really look at the records to see, um, well, was he really there during that entire time? Right? It doesn't, because we have documentation that he is uh, there. We have to also remember that it doesn't mean that he's constantly there. And so again, yeah, absolutely, Daniel. These guys were spies. That's what they did, and that was their main line of work. So again, gang, really great points. This slide is a little messed up there. So here's Chris's discovery on the brass plate. Just like Peter Amundsen had found the Bacon pentagon on Shakespeare's plaque, Chris found one on Drake's brass plate. And so here we have another Bacon pentagon. And you can see the letters in it, symmetrical pentagon, BACON, in the same fashion as they appear on the plaque. And when you actually spell it out in order, so if we go from B to A, down here to C, up here to O, and then back here to N, and then back, it actually makes a perfect pentagram. And again, this pentagon appearing on both this and the plaque itself, that's kind of interesting. Again, the idea that this is a coincidence is really pretty amazing in that sense. Now, here's what Chris postulated. Here is, in this image of Drake's plate, brass plate, that Bacon would have done this back when he was 18 years old. And so what we see is the advancement, the difference between what he was able to do when he was 18 versus when he was in his 50s or 60s, when he created the plaque on Shakespeare's Funerary monument. And so if we just kind of do these in order, you can see all of a sudden it forms this pentagram. It's really pretty interesting. So now, what's the problem with this theory? Well, there was the metal analysis that was done on the brass of the plaque, where the scientists concluded that this brass was modern. The other problem that some of you have already pointed out, this is the problem that I have, is the timeline. Bacon was in France in 1577, and so he couldn't possibly have been on Drake's voyage around the world. When he returned in February of 1579, well, what did he return to? He didn't have an inheritance. He would not. I mean, maybe he could have. Maybe some of you could answer this question for me, because I don't understand how he could have been present on Drake's ship when they landed in California. If he returned in February of the same year that the ship was there in June. Now, could he have caught up using a different ship? Was he, was that a thing? Was that a part of the plan? Was there a ship that was going out to assist Drake and bring him? I haven't found any information about that ever happened. So I have a problem with that. Um, Here are some possible explanations for this, however, because again, I want to be able to, you know, give everyone the benefit of the doubt here. We know historically that there have been a lot of cover-ups when it comes to the Bacon and Shakespeare hypothesis, right? They have defaced monuments, they've defaced all kinds of evidence and ciphers. There have been forgeries that have been perpetrated in order to cover up the idea of Bacon as Shakespeare. Could something similar be happening here with the brass plate here? You know, um, I don't know, gang. Could something similar be happening like that? Um, so yeah, there are a couple of things that are coming up here, and again, Daniel, what are the odds of that? I really don't know. I have no idea even how to calculate what that would be, but I thought the same thing. Like, that's very, very strange. And I analyzed the bees on the plate, and they are in the form of basically think of a window, right? A window frame. And when I was looking at these letters, it's like a um, think of a window with an X in it, or a cross. And so why form a bee that way? And when I really started looking at it, the um the lines of it didn't line up, and it appeared in my mind to be comprised of three T's, a triple tau. Again, what are the odds of that? Uh, it was the plaque made far in advance, and when Drake discovered an area that he felt was worthy of being called Nova Albion, did he say, "Okay, pull out the plaque. We're gonna," and then did they add the date that he landed? I don't know. I don't know. Um, let's see. Great comments, gang. In the Rosa group, could there have been others, such as Bacon's half brother, who knew ciphering also? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that it's entirely possible that Anthony was with Drake, perhaps. I don't know. Um, One of the things that I've been thinking is that the Rosicrucians, if it were a true group, a true secret society, I think it was comprised of what I would call royal cousins, where you have Robert Devereux, actually was the son of Queen Elizabeth the First, would have been Bacon's cousin, and then I believe that Henry Wriothesley was also uh, Devereux's younger brother. So I really don't know. I think that stop. Yeah, I'll throw that one up there, Tom. You got to give yourself more credit there, man. I just, you know, I need a more interesting hobby, I think is what it is. I'm just too big of a nerd and I spend too much time on this stuff. But again, I really wanted to show the idea that Chris has put out here, that could this be there we go with that phrase from Oak Island, gang. Could it be? Um, could this be another? At one point, this plate, and I've got a couple of good historians out there, so correct me if I'm wrong, or feel free to jump in. At one point, the plaque was lost. This brass plate, excuse me, was lost to history, and then all of a sudden it resurfaces. It goes through. It changes hands a handful of times. And then the professor for whom it was originally intended locates it and buys it. Um, and then we find out years later, as the library where it's housed, they start investigating. Suddenly, we've identified that group that claim we did that, we hoaxed it. Um, and again, one of the things that, yeah, Tom, a couple of great questions here and a couple of great comments. Based on aliases that he used, it's entirely possible. Now, um, I've recently found another alias of Bacon that I'm not ready to announce yet, but he actually created a map that basically gives a general location of Nova Albion. So where did that come from? Could Bacon have had a hand in the creation of this brass plate? I don't know. And if so, I mean, what would the purpose be? I just really and here's probably UC Berkeley. Yes, that's where it was. If Bacon had aliases and secretly traveled, he would have needed a double. You are absolutely right, Daniel, and I think he had one. It's entirely possible that he had a sibling who looked remarkably like him, and so again, all of these are possibilities, gang. So, uh, boy, Tom, I could go for a double myself. Yeah. But, I don't know, gang. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, what are the odds that, and Jenny's getting inky with it, always has great comments. Why would they put Bacon's name on a plaque that would be left in California? What purpose would that serve? Great question. I don't know, honestly. I suspect, I mean, if this plaque is authentic, okay, and actually is not a hoax, let's go down that road for a second, um, and think about this. Um, if it's authentic and Bacon had a hand in creating it, here he's 18, probably one of the smartest people always in the room at that point in his life. And here he is, he's 18 years old, and all of the guys, all of the men out there, you know how we all are at 18. Um, he's going to want to leave his name on it if he made it. Because there's a lot of ego going on there. I think, at least I well, speaking for myself when I was 18. So the whole idea is that, um, I think that if he had a hand in it, he would want to leave his name on it, or the name that we know him by, because frankly, in all of my research, the name Francis Bacon, in and of itself, was an alias to begin with. So there's that. So great questions, Greg. Yeah, bottoms up, Tom. Uh, Whoa, Daniel's going for the triple already. I didn't know I was going to drive you guys to drink so quickly this evening. We've only been out of here about a half an hour, so great thoughts. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, do you think that it's entirely possible that this thing is authentic, or the only way that it could be authentic, and here's the thing, um, is if there is, and when I first looked at it, my first indication before I started digging into it was, wow, this looks very cryptic. And it look, one of the very first things you do when you're looking at something that's that cryptic is, okay, so what's encrypted, right? Yeah. Oh, great point here. Yeah. UC Berkeley spent 4 grand on it, a large sum then. Now they say it's a hoax. So I'm struggling that it could be authentic. Again, I'm right there with you. The idea that they would, lay down a bunch of cash for it, and the original professor did too. I think he spent something like 1,500 on it at the time, which back then was a boatload of money. So, yeah, the idea that suddenly they say, "Oh, it's a hoax," but then again, in the grand scheme of things, what would 4K be today in today's dollars? And when it comes to the endowments that UC Berkeley has, and the money they have on hand, how big of a dent would that make? And again, if I'm gonna go play devil's advocate here, what I would say is that if there is an encrypted message, like I said, I haven't really looked at it that closely, um, and it's something that is once again history changing. Uh, would members of, say, certain groups be willing to, you know, go to bat and say, no, no, this whole thing's been hoaxed all along? Is that a thing? we know that it happened with Shakespeare and Bacon and all of that research. So again, it's really pretty interesting. Yeah, that's just it, Daniel. Would they be willing to test it again? It's already been tested, and they definitively said, "Nope, this thing's a hoax. This is modern brass." So at that point, I think that one of the things that we have that happen with mainstream history and Orthodox history is that once that happens, it's like boom, okay, we're done, definitive. It's been decided, right? And and I'm also with you on that aspect too, Daniel. So many aspects of that story are, in a word, sketchy, 100%. So it's interesting. I now see both sides. When I first started looking at it, I'm like, well, it was basically proven to be a hoax. You even have people admitting that they were the ones who did it, but as I said before, on the other side, if they are members of a group who, for whatever reason, want to keep a lid on this thing, um, you know, would they be willing to, throw themselves on the sword? And another good point: academics worried they might be wrong. Well, there's a lot of grant money that could be tied up with reputations and so on. So I've definitely am very familiar with academics who will hold on to an idea and not want to admit that they're wrong. Absolutely, that happens. uh, what would you do if we pulled a prank like that on you, Jake? Well, I'm trying to keep the podcast PG at least, so I can't really use the language I want to use. But uh, basically, I would probably cry for a while, Daniel, without a doubt. um, oh, there you go, Jenny. Yeah, could be they bought it to hide it away, called it a hoax so as to keep people from looking at it or citing it. Acad- Academia has been known to discredit the credible. Yeah, if we actually, when you consider that a lot of people actually claim that the Smithsonian is basically its job is to take things that don't fit in with how history should be presented and kind of hide it away. So Jenny, yeah, you could be onto something there too. Now, Dawn, that's not true at all. I, I I I would not consider myself a master, but and yes, absolutely, I would go for the triple for sure. So I don't know, gang. Good thoughts. Yeah, Daniel, Jenny, Tom. The idea that we could actually uh, apparently, you guys have more confidence in me than I do because it didn't even occur to me to even say that, Jenny. uh, so, and Tom, I tend to kind of be along the same lines of thinking as you when it comes to this sort of thing, for sure. Um, Particularly after the last couple of years we've had, right, gang? I mean, with all the things the experts have been telling us. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that now. I'll get banned from YouTube or something. But at any rate, yeah, it probably deserves further scrutiny for sure, my friend. Um, oh, this is interesting. Very cool, Jason. The Back Creek Stone um, was thought to be Cherokee origin and was stored at Smithsonian. Years later, someone looked at it again. They turned it upside down and found out the text on the stone was not Cherokee; it was Hebrew. There have been so many finds of stones carved with Hebrew text out in the Southwest. Um, that's pretty cool. Very cool. Yeah, Daniel, maybe, at this point, any of you who have read my book, you know that I gave up the word impossible a while ago. Nothing is impossible to me anymore, considering some of the things that I've found. So yeah, anything's possible at this point. Not really sure what you mean. Maybe they would be happy to. Do we know that they won't? Not really sure. And notice, I started a while ago, and I'm still new at this. My banner is still saying that Ghosts of Bacon will be starting shortly. Oops. There we go. I'll get rid of that. So yeah, not sure what you mean by that. But at this point, I think that anything's possible. And I think Daniel's right in terms of this idea of the only way to really figure out anything definitively is to really test using the most modern methods and putting it to rest once and for all. With an independent source doing it, if that's possible to do anymore. So great thoughts, gang. All right. Uh, like I said, I had originally hoped we'd be able to talk a little bit with Chris, but like I said, I really wanted to hear his take on this because he's been kind of digging deeply into it. And again, I mean, if this, in my mind, it reopened this whole idea that there's a possibility that something's there because for there to be two Bacon pentagons in two completely different places, and yet they the plate and the plaque both share so many features of being comprised of 8 lines and the placement of the pentagon. It raises some questions in my mind. Um, oh, more comments. Cool. Would the people who claim it as a hoax who have it now be willing to test the brass? Do we know the? Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a great question. If they want to maintain the idea that it is a hoax and maybe it isn't, would they say, "Oh, yeah, here, go ahead, test it again"? Yeah, probably not. Great thought. Um, there's a stone in Kentucky that some claim the been of Welsh on it and documented King Arthur being in Kentucky, but they say the version of Welsh wasn't used till well after Arthur's time. Yeah, over the years, this is the problem with this kind of research, gang, is that hoaxes do happen. People really do just want to screw around with people. Because let's face it, sometimes it's fun. Um, my sister Dawn was just referring to a game we used to play when we were kids because we grew up, we were hillbillies and we didn't have a lot to do. And we lived out in the country. And so we thought it would be fun. Our father gave us this idea of something that he and his brothers used to do to play pranks on passing motorists. Now, don't ever do this, but it kind of give you an insight into what my sister was talking about and why it's fun to mess with people. Um, we would take an old, worn out tire, and back in the day, they used to wrap them up when you bought a brand new tire, they would wrap them up in brown paper, right, and with masking tape and so on. Well, we would take an old beat up tire and we'd wrap it in paper bags and make it look like it was a brand new tire, and then we would put baling twine on it and mask that with the masking tape, and then bury the rope beside the road. And we'd leave the tire beside the road, and then we would bury the rope, the baling twine, and then we'd hide in the woods and wait for someone to stop, drive by, stop, see a brand new tire, decide to pick it up, and then we'd yank on the rope and scare them. So, yeah, yeah, everyone likes Don and my dad for sure. But we did that just because it was hilarious. First of all, particularly if people had been at the bar downtown before they were on their way home, they have to see the tire beside the road. Again, it's fun to mess with people. And so that the stone that Jenny was referring to, um, the idea that experts have said this, and then you followed it up, Jenny, with this: "We are at the mercy of those who claim to know." Yeah, yeah, 100%. That's one of the things that, I did in my book. I said, "Hey, listen, check it out, test it. Uh, if you can prove me wrong, let me know. I want to know if I screwed up." right? Don't just accept something that I say because oh, this is what I found. I laid out all of the evidence and spelled it out for people so that they could look at it, and investigate themselves. But yeah, we kind of lost that aspect of asking questions, of questioning those in authority, the experts. And so I think that's an important thing to definitely pay attention to. Tom with a good comment. Things When things are subject to audit, the one question that has to be answered with each statement is, "How do you know?" 100%, Tom. Yeah, exactly. How do you know? And this is one of the things that I've been really struggling with all of my research, because on the one hand, I love history, and but then on the other, one of the things that I do is I always remember the passage in the book 1984, and I think I mentioned this on one of my other podcasts or when I was a guest. And in it, the main character, Winston Smith, it's his job to change history. Okay, he's the one that puts things down the memory hole, and then he creates a new history. And in one section, he creates a character named Comrade Ogilvy, and he just made him up, and he gave him awards of distinction, all of these different kinds of things. But when he finished and he basically put it in the history books, he makes this comment, or he thinks of this comment to himself in his head. He says, um, "As soon as this is accepted, Comrade Ogilvy will exist in history just as authentically as Charlemagne and Julius Caesar, and based upon the same evidence." When I read that sentence, it blew my mind, because ultimately we are at the mercy, like Jenny had said, of those who claim to know. Now, when a historian tries to dig in deep and they try to find primary documents, they have to trust who wrote those primary documents. And then if you have, someone like the Bacon brothers running around under aliases and writing letters to themselves under other aliases to make them all appear to be authentic people and to lend a semblance of credibility to them, suddenly you have a paper trail that is a primary source that is all fictional. Uh, Oof. So, needless to say, that's been kind of bugging me. All right, a couple of the other questions. Dan Spino. Drake and Bacon were linked. They were linked to the same people, and to find a confirmed direct link between them is a very significant in relation to Oak Island. Sure is, my friend. And I think that one of the um, links there, once again, are navigation. Bacon was a sailor, and I think he learned it, from the man himself, Sir Francis Drake. Drake being one of the probably the most profitable privateer in English history. Boy, wouldn't you want to get your hands on some of those goods? I know I would. I hope some of them are on Oak Island. So, yeah. Um, Jenny, I promise we never did that. And by the way, you just referenced one of the creepiest movies I've ever watched. Yeah, I agree. And you know, again, I can't really agree with this even more any more than I already am. But you know, we see this working today. Where all of a sudden, you'll see a story hit the news, and then after the news cycle of 2 weeks, the average length of the average person's memory is gone. Suddenly, that history changes. Yeah, it's a scary, scary thing for sure. I agree with you there. Um, Great thoughts, people. So anyway, going to go ahead and wrap things up here, unless anyone has any more questions or observations. Um, I wanted to share this with you, just food for thought, something to think about. In the big question, I think, of the evening was, how do you know? How do you know? And I think the only way to do that is to just kind of keep digging, use discernment, Use your critical thinking skills. Think about your cognitive biases, for example. Particularly protect yourself from confirmation bias. Make sure you're not just seeing what you want to see. Um, and once you're able to do that, then you can start looking for any kind of fallacies of logic, fallacies in your thinking. Once you really kind of become adept at those, that's when you can kind of you can tell what I call you can discern the difference between the BS and the chocolate pudding, and I think that's an important skill to have. That is why they call it tunnel vision, Tom, for sure. Um, yep. Would Drake would Drake be able to create the system that seems to be on Oak Island? It seems Bacon wouldn't have supervised it himself. Again, Jenny, great question. And frankly, I definitely see Bacon being the one pulling the strings of that whole operation. And Chris Donah has a lot of great info on that as well. Um, the whole idea where, I mean, one of the things that I found in the cipher text, Bacon references uh, basically what we call Nolan's cross. He calls it by something else, but he does reference it. And he refers to it as if it's his. He says my. Um, so who knows? Who knows if Drake? I'm sure. Here's the thing about Oak Island, gang, and I've said this on other interviews. I've said this on other podcasts and my own. Um, Oak Island. People always say, "Why that little island?" Frankly, I think it's just a known spot that has been used and reused by mariners over the centuries. I think that you have a word of mouth history of, hey, listen, this is the perfect spot. I trust you, and I'll share this spot with you. I've used it multiple times, and I think it's something that dates back to the Templars for sure, but without a doubt, the privateers, in particular, Drake, the Danish privateers, and Bacon definitely knew about it. So hard to believe, but yet another great comment, Daniel. Based on some evidence found in Oregon, triangulation was used to place objects. D was using this technique. Did he teach that to Bacon? I would say 100% yes. Uh, D was known to teach navigation skills, uh, basically three-dimensional geometry, for lack of a better term, um, of how to triangulate your position on the planet. And he definitely would have. He definitely would have done that. Janie's going to clarify. Uh, could Drake follow Bacon's directions and account for problems as they arose? Wasn't meaning Bacon was behind it. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Just unlikely he came to the island as a foreman. Yeah, Jenny, I think that that's a good way of looking at it, but I think that I think that Drake and Bacon would have used that island in parallel with one another, not necessarily that Drake would have been following the orders of Bacon. Um, because, like I said, I think that Bacon worked for Drake on his ship, and I really don't know how many years. I haven't been able to find more information in terms of the duration of his tenure with him. But the idea that I think that uh, Drake used the island probably for his privateering um expeditions, storage. Probably a place to put in when in stormy weather. It's a great area for that. Um, So yeah, a great question, and yeah, I get it. Yeah, a couple of great comments here. Yeah, Tom, there's definitely a common thread, and in my latest work, hopefully I'll be able to share it with you all before the end of the year. Uh, but there's definitely evidence to show that for sure. And again, Jason, Templar, yes, there's a common denominator of Scotland And you have to remember that there was the old alliance between Scotland and France. Okay, so you also have a French connection there as well. The other way around, Drake worked for Bacon or his group. I don't know. Such an interesting question. I I think that Drake was definitely a part of the group, if not, one of the forerunners of it. Um, so yeah, I think that that idea is definitely in there. Um, but again, I haven't really considered. It's such an interesting question because I haven't really considered the idea, gang, that one worked for the other, but basically that they all worked with one another. It seems to be the way. Yeah, Daniel. I think that what I have keyed in on in particular is most definitely the Rosicrucian Freemason angle. Uh, and again, one of the big things I keep telling the other researchers, the other theorists, this is not mutually exclusive of the Knights Templar tradition either, because I see it as a continuation of the very same thing. It's just that the information that I've come across, the information that I found, it's all indicating Rosicrucian and Freemasonry for sure. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, Linda. I thought the same thing. Those of you who have already logged in on uh, Streamyard so that I can see your comments. Apparently, I had assumed that once you logged in, that you'd be able to, I'd be able to see your names, but apparently, you have to log in to each individual's Streamyard. So sorry for the confusion about that. And boom, there it is. The idea of Oak Island kind of being the baton that gets passed on. Yeah, absolutely. Tom, you just brought up another great comment too. Uh, I don't think that Oak Island is the only location they used or shared for sure. I'm sure that they had, um, multiple places to deposit and withdraw for sure. Jason, yes. Um, there's a really good connection there too, I think, for sure. All right, everyone. Well, listen, thanks again for tuning in live, and it'll be posted on my YouTube channel, and it will also be on Ghosts of Bacon group. And so, tell you what, gang, we'll do this again in a couple of weeks, and I think that I'm going to have some more information for you. I do have a lot more information regarding a follow up with Drake that I'm going to be saving for a later date. And this one's just really cool. But this came up, and Julie, thank you so much. Hey, Jeff, thanks for popping in. I will definitely give Chris all of your well wishes, and thank you very much for that. I know that he appreciates that too. Um, Thanks, Jeff. And thanks, Linda. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm still learning the ropes here, still trying to figure things out. But as this information kind of comes up, and I want to share it out with you, a lot of you have been kind of giving me stuff behind the scenes, and I really, really appreciate the back and forth and all of the help you guys give me. So thanks so much. And hey, listen, if you bought my book, head over to Amazon if you get a minute and write me a review, even if it's scathingly bad. Okay, so I'd appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Don. All right. Thanks, gang. Appreciate you all. Take care. See you next time.